All right, let's jump into our teaching today. Are y'all with me? All right. So today we are wrapping up our teaching series called Mind Shift. Everyone say Mind Shift. And this whole series is largely about taking some of these toxic or broken mindsets that oftentimes we carry, maybe even unknowingly carry, that is keeping us from stepping into the life that God has created you to live. See, a lot of times I hear people talk about why they're not stepping into their purpose, why they don't feel like they're living the fully alive life. And often what we do is we blame the external realities or our external limitations for why we're not living the life we know that we're created to live. And isn't that a frustrating place when you find yourself in between who you are and where you know you're meant to be and who you're meant to be? That's a tough place to be in. And oftentimes we blame the external limitations when in fact, and what this series is largely about, is that more often than not, what needs to be checked out is not what's limiting you externally, but what's limiting you internally. And oftentimes for many of us, what is limiting us is a mindset that has put a low ceiling on your purpose and on your life. Which the good news is, that means that for many of us, you are one mind shift away from an entirely different life. And some of you thought you would just need a new job, a new spouse, new kids, a new city, a new life. And you're like, if I could just have something new, then my life would be completely different. But I'm here to tell you today that the world around you does not need to change for your life to change. That if you want to change your life, oftentimes, I would even argue all the time, it starts not with changing the world around you, but with changing your mind. And this series has been about us looking at different mindsets that we need to shift and change. And so I would encourage, if you missed the series, go to our YouTube channel. You could catch up. I think it'll be a helpful series for you. But today we're gonna sort of land the plane on this series, Mind Shift, before we start our Advent series in just a couple weeks. But today I want to talk about what does it look like for you to sort of create a TSA checkpoint in your mind. What does it look like for you to create sort of a TSA checkpoint in your mind? And this idea, this metaphor came up this past week as I was coaching somebody, and we were talking about toxic thoughts and broken ideas and mindsets that are unhealthy and unhelpful. And what do we do with this? And as we were talking, we were like, wouldn't it be nice if there was a way to just like have a TSA checkpoint in your mind where before any thought or idea or mindset was allowed to board your life, that you would search and screen and pat down these ideas before letting them on board and directing your life forward. You're like, wouldn't it be nice if there was a way to do that? And I don't know about you, but when I fly, the TSA checkpoint is my least favorite part of flying. Anybody with me? Like, it's my least favorite part of the journey of going to the airport, and I see the value in it, obviously, but I don't know about you, but it's crazy. Like, we put a man on the moon in the age of AI. Like, I still have to, like, empty my backpack, take off my shoes, and, like, take off half my clothes to just get through the TSA checkpoint. You would think there would be a better way by now, but alas, here we are. But it's a good thing that we have this, right? Because it protects everyone getting on board their planes, and although it's sort of an inconvenience at times, I think the pros outweigh the cons because it protects anyone from getting on a plane that could, at a minimum, stop you from getting to your destination. At a maximum, it protects your very life. And a TSA checkpoint of the mind can do the same thing. That if we don't protect the thoughts and ideas that we adopt, at a minimum, it will keep you from reaching the destinations that God is inviting you into. At a maximum, if we do not guard the thoughts that we think, and we let any thought or idea board our mindset, as a result, at the worst, it could actually stop you from ever living the life that you were created to live. So how do we do this? How do we create a TSA checkpoint in your mind? And by the way, this is not some new idea. This is actually an ancient concept that Paul talks about. Now, Paul doesn't use a TSA checkpoint because planes didn't exist a couple thousand years ago, but he does talk about the power of your words, and the power of your thoughts, and the power of your mindsets, and why we've got to be intentional about guarding our minds from toxic or broken or unhealthy or unhelpful ideas or thought processes. And Paul talks about this in 2 Corinthians chapter 10. Verse 5, he says this, "We demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, and we take captive," say take captive out loud. We take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. We take captive. That's aggressive language, isn't it? He doesn't say, we just sort of, we let any and every thought or idea or mindset, we just allow it to enter into our life and into our thought processes and to direct our life. No, he says we take captive every thought. You get the sense when you read the words of Paul that Paul is playing offense with his life, not defense. And I think far too many of us, we're actually not playing offense with our life, we're playing defense. You're not playing to win, you're just playing not to lose. And Paul here is inviting us into a better way, a way of intentionality, a way that says, look, I'm not just going to let life happen to me, I'm going to happen to life. I'm not just going to allow any and every thought to show up and take up real estate in my mind, but I'm going to take captive every thought, and I'm going to make it obedient to Christ. What does that even mean? What I would say it means is that you, like we talked about in week 1, you are created for love. You're wired for love. Any thought or mindset or mentality or idea that is beneath love, if it doesn't invite you to love God, love yourself, love people, or love the world that God has given us, then that thought, idea, or mentality or mindset is beneath who you were created to be. It's beneath what it means to be fully alive and fully human. And so Paul, he's like, we take every thought captive and make it obedient to Christ. What is he saying? He's saying, I refuse to live beneath love. I refuse to live beneath what God created me to live and who God has created me to be. But he says, you gotta take these thoughts captive. Like having a healthy mindset just won't happen. Like having no toxic thoughts that are directing your life in a toxic direction. That just won't happen on accident. It takes intentionality. And that's what we're talking about today. When we talk about how do we create a TSA checkpoint in your own mind and with your thoughts, how do we play offense with our thoughts, not defense? And how do we happen to life instead of letting life just happen to us? How do we do what Paul's talking about here? Now, if you're a note taker, if you are you're a very practical linear thinker, anyone here sitting next to a very linear thinker in the room, give them a nudge right now. I see a couple people pointing at each other. You're going to love this teaching today because this is extremely practical, extremely easy for you to begin to carry out in your life. Rather, I should say it's simple. It won't always be easy, but it is simple for you to begin to carry this out in your life if you want to begin to take captive every thought and idea. And what I want you to do is write down these 4 words because these are the 4 ideas that we're going to talk about today. Receive, review, refocus, renew. How do we create a TSA checkpoint in our mind? How do we take every thought captive? We got to receive, review, refocus, renew. When you don't know what to do, you need to receive, review, refocus, renew. Ooh, I feel the spirit of Tupac on this message. Come on now. When your life gets crazy, what are you going to do? Receive, review, refocus, renew. When your spouse is acting like such a tool, receive, review, refocus, renew. When your kids are demon possessed because you didn't get them that toy at Target in the Target aisle, receive, review, refocus, renew. And when your roommate is gross and doesn't clean up their room, receive, review, refocus, renew. Next time a thought shows up, because let me remind you, you can't control when a thought shows up, but you always have control whether that thought gets to stay. You're always in control whether you will open up the door and allow that thought to take up residence in your mindset. But before you do that, here's what I want you to do. I want you to receive, review, refocus, and renew. So let's talk about this a little bit. What does it look like to receive? What does it look like to receive the thoughts that are floating around in your mindset, that are shaping and informing your life? And what we need to do is we need to create a space. Rather, I would invite you to do it. Create a space where you can begin to receive your thoughts and capture any rogue thoughts or ideas before these thoughts begin to capture you. See, research has actually shown, and many of you know this, that 5 to 16 minutes a day of just sitting and thinking shifts the frontal brain states that are more likely to engage with the world. In other words, when you practice 5 to 16 minutes a day of just sitting and thinking, what neurologists have found to be true is it sort of primes your day for whatever the life is going to throw at you. In fact, it's been proven that people who are more intentional about being still and more thoughtful, and they practice this regularly, they're just overall happier people. Because instead of letting their day happen to them, they're happening to their day. They're setting the tone for their day by creating the space of thoughtful quietness. And it's only been in the last 20 plus years that we've discovered that there's actually a part of your brain that is called the default mode network, or in short, the DMN. And the DMN turns on when you enter into a state of deep thought or meditation or imagination or self-reflection. This is the part of your brain that when you turn off, this part of your brain turns on. Have you ever been struggling to remember something? Right? And you're like focused on trying to remember. Maybe it was where you put your keys or that person's name or something. And you're like, what? Where did I do this? Or who is that person? You're working so hard to remember and you can't remember it. But then you're driving down the road, I don't know, 8 hours later, and you're just zoning out, and then all of a sudden it hits you. That's because while you were off, your mind was on. And your mind was working hard to figure out, to find the information that you were looking for. And that is what your default mode network does. And so how do we allow our mind the time to turn on, to process, to think, to sift through everything that's rolling around in our subconscious? We got to take moments to intentionally turn off, to pause, to rest, to be still, and to allow your brain to begin to sort of turn on. The issue is we don't like that, do we? Like being still is not something that comes natural. You talk to most people today, say, hey, how are you doing? Most people are going to say what? Busy. Right? Like we love saying that. We love the idea of being busy, and when we're not busy, we feel bad that we're not busy. Anybody else struggle with that? Because we are addicted to movement. We're addicted to noise. We're addicted to productivity. So it makes this idea of being still. Some of you are like, 16 minutes of just being still? You're like, that sounds awful to me. But the thing is that if we want to create a TSA checkpoint in our mind, we've got to practice this part where we slow down long enough and we kind of begin to identify what thoughts are lining up in our mind. What thoughts are trying to break through? What mindsets are trying to direct our lives and get on board our lives? And maybe this is why some of the most successful thought leaders and marketplace leaders constantly plan thinking time. It's one of those consistent things that you meet leaders of mega organizations, and one thing you'll hear them say oftentimes is how often they just are still and they think. They spend time and encourage their team to think. AOL CEO Tim Armstrong makes his senior team spend 4 hours per week just thinking. Jack Dorsey, who founded Twitter and Square, is known as a serial wanderer. LinkedIn executives schedule 2 hours of thinking time per day. Can you imagine thinking 2 hours per day? Brian Scudamore, the founder of a $250 million company, spends 10 hours a week just thinking. Or Bill Gates, you might have heard of him. He has this thing where he goes away for a week, and he calls it Think Week. And he completely unplugs, and he takes an entire week just to think. And one of my favorite quotes from Bill Gates is this. He says, busy is the new stupid, which I love that. Busy is the new stupid. Or I think how when the story of God giving the 10 commandments to Moses, you might be familiar with this story. Of all the 10 commandments, there was only one commandment that God actually qualified as holy. And that commandment was for people to rest. It was the only commandment of the 10 where God said, this one is holy. And it was to rest. And so this idea of being still, of receiving what's going on in your mind, what you're thinking about, those thoughts that are there that you might not have otherwise known were there had you not slowed down. This idea of slowing down is not a new concept. In fact, in Psalm 46, verse 10, written thousands and thousands of years ago, the author says, be still and know that I'm God. Be still and know that I'm God. He didn't say be stressed and know that I'm God. Be busy and know that I'm God. Be hurried and know that I'm God. He says be still and know that I'm God. Because every time you're still, it gives your mind time to learn what your spirit knows. It's important to slow down. And I think this is a timely message as we go into this holiday week. Every time I go into the holidays, I don't know if anybody else can relate to this, I always am like, I'm going to soak it all in. I don't want it to go by fast. And then December 31st rolls around, and you're like, oh my gosh, it went by so fast. Because it's hard to just be still. But like, what if this week you practice this? You're just going to be still and create space to receive what's going on in your mind, to allow yourself to even zone out sometimes and allow what bubbles up to bubble up so that you can begin to identify what thoughts, ideas, or mindsets are trying to get on board your life. So how do you create a TSA checkpoint? First, you got to receive. You got to create some time to be still. The second is to review. And this is the part where you ask yourself, if this thought became my future, Would it be a future I would one day want to forget, or would it be a future worth creating? See, because we got to remember that our thoughts are real things in us doing real things to us. That before you do anything, you think. We are thinking beings. And the lives are the output of the thoughts that we think about the most. And so as we receive, we got to begin to review. This thought right here, is this going to create a future worth fighting for? Or is this thought going to create a future that one day I'm going to be like, man, I want to forget this. This is not the future I want to be in. So you got to take time to almost step outside of yourself and look at your thoughts from an objective standpoint. Almost like you're holding it right now and be like, what is this thought going to do to me if I hold this for too long? I'm a wannabe surfer. I do more falling than surfing. But one thing I've learned about surfing is that when you're out there in the water, if you really want to enjoy your time, and I've learned this a hard way, I've learned that you cannot chase every wave. That when you're there in the water, if you chase every wave, you're going to burn out. You're going to just run out of steam, and the ocean is just going to spit you back out to the shore. See, when you're out there and you're on your surfboard, you got to kind of look at the waves that are coming down your way, and you got to identify, is this a wave worth catching? And oftentimes, they're not. They're waves that as you sit on your board, you got to let them go under you and move on. And I think when it comes to reviewing our thoughts, it works the same way. That as you're sitting on the surfboard of your mind and you see these thoughts coming your way, you got to ask yourself, is this worth paddling out for? Is this worth getting on board for? And if not, then allow it to just move right on past you. I mean, even as you take time to receive and be still and think, imagine yourself even almost like in the ocean of your own thoughts. What are the waves that are coming your way? And which one do you actually need to catch? And which ones do you actually need to let move beyond you? So first we got to receive, and then we got to review, and then we got to refocus. You got to refocus, right? It's not enough to just remove a toxic thought, right? This is why people who try and change their mindset through willpower, it doesn't work. This idea of like, I'm just going to say no, and just keep saying no, like that might work for a moment, it won't work for a lifetime. See, you can't just remove a toxic thought. You got to replace it with something better. You got to replace it with something healthier. You got to replace it with a new thought, a new mindset. And so you might say, "Oh, I'm a broken person." That's a thought you want to remove from your life. But it's not enough just to say, "No, I'm not a broken person." Replace it with something better. I'm a healing person. That's a much different thought. That takes you a much different direction. See, we got to choose what we focus on. See, you don't always get to choose what shows up in your life. But you always, always, always get to choose what you focus on. And this is so important to understand because what you focus on, you get more of. What you focus on, you get more of. I've never met a person who is just always, always stressed about life, who is not always, always focusing on the source of their stress. Or people who are bitter and angry. The reason that they're bitter and angry and continue to create more bitterness and anger in their life often is because they're continuing to focus on the source of their anger and bitterness instead of redirecting their focus somewhere healthier or more productive. See, what you focus on, you get more of. So if you're getting more stress, maybe ask yourself, I wonder what I'm focusing on right now. If you're like, I have no joy, well, what are you focusing on that's actually bringing you joy? Are you just waiting for joy to like show up and arrive? That's not how it works. Like, what are you focusing on that curates more joy in your life? If you're angry or bitter or you're cynical, which has been sort of a theme throughout the series, this mindset of cynicism, well, if you always focus on bad news, then no wonder that you're a more cynical person. What would it look like for you to actually begin to go out and find good news? Go and find things that are worth focusing on. Why? Because what you focus on, you get more of. You see, fear and faith, and this won't be on the screen, but I think it's worth writing down. Fear and faith, while they're different, they're fueled by the same thing, and that's focus. Fear and faith are both fueled by focus. What you focus on, you get more of. And you can't control what shows up, but you do get to control whether or not you will focus on it or not. I love what Proverbs says, this wisdom literature found in the Hebrew Bible to the left of the New Testament. And the writer here, he says this: if you search for good, you'll find favor. And if you search for evil, it will find you. It's a pretty simple principle, isn't it? If you search for good, guess what? You're going to find it. And if you search for evil, guess what? You're going to find that too. And you see that all the time when you go in somewhere and you're like, this is just going to be a waste of time. Guess what? Usually it's a waste of time. It's like on Sunday mornings. If you show up here and you're like, it's just going to be another service, another message, I'm not going to get anything out of it, then guess what? You're not going to get anything out of it. But if you show up here and you say, you know what, God, I think you got something to say to me. I cannot wait to hear what it is you're going to say. God, I'm ready to grow today. God, I'm opening my heart to you because I know you want to speak to me. Guess what? You're going to hear from God. Because if you search for good, you find it. But if you search for evil, it will find you. See, if we want to have a TSA in our mind, the first step we might need to understand is what positive psychology research has been telling us for around the past 15 years. And that is that the most significant factors in your day-to-day and moment-to-moment happiness, and this is not coming from the Bible, this is coming from psychology today. The greatest factors are not circumstantial. It's not environmental. It's not hereditary. It's not your genes. The most significant factor in your happiness is your focus. The most significant factor in your hope is your focus. In your optimism is your focus. Which means all of you have hope and purpose and joy readily available to you. The question is, will you focus on that which creates those things, or will you focus on the things that actually starve joy or starve peace or starve purpose in your life? And at the end of the day, your focus is your job. Your focus is your job. It's not your spouse's job. It's not your roommate's job. It's not your sibling's job. It's not even your parents' job. Your focus is your job. And the last thing is this. We're going to receive, we're going to review, we're going to refocus. And the last thing is this. We're going to renew. We're going to renew. Renewing your mind means taking intentional steps to feed what needs to live and starve what needs to die. So this is where another network in your brain is so important. I just mentioned a few minutes ago about the default mode network that turns on when you turn off. When you're meditating or reflecting or imagining, that part of your brain starts firing on all cylinders. It starts getting to work. Well, there's another part of your brain called the TPN, which is the task positive network. And the TPN supports the active thinking required to make decisions. Right? So as we think and we reflect, we activate our DMN. And when we begin to say, okay, action steps, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, here's how we move forward, now the TPN in your brain begins to function. It begins to turn on. And neurologists have found that those who are overly reliant on their DMN or overly reliant on their TPN are more anxious and depressed people, right? Because if you're all DMN and no TPN, that means this. You're dreaming, but you're not doing anything. You're reflecting and you're imagining, but you're taking no action. And dreams without action is what? A daydream, right? But if you're overly reliant on your TPN, meaning you don't dream or think or consider your thoughts at all, you're just like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, and you're all work, no thoughtfulness, well, they say, gosh, that's not a good way to live as well. That you need both the DMN and TPN to work together, because a dream without action is a daydream, but a bunch of action with no thoughtfulness, that's a nightmare. Like if we're just acting without even thinking about what it is we're doing, we're out of balance in our life. And so a crucial step to taking your thoughts captive and winning the battle in your mind is really about taking regular action steps that will feed the kind of thoughts that will create a future worth fighting for. Again, it's the difference between playing offense and defense. A defensive life, you're just waiting to get better. You're just waiting to feel better. You're just waiting to have all joy and peace just show up and stay forever. But that's not how it works. It's not how it works. What we're invited into is to actually take regular action steps and to create the future we're fighting for. And renew your mind, reshape your brain, which in turn reshapes your life in order for you to thrive. So here's the question I would ask you. If, as you think about what does it look like to renew your mind, is what is one habit that you could do each day to feed a healthy mindset? Like, what is one habit that you could do each day to begin to feed a healthy mindset, to renew your mind and the thoughts and the ideas that you hold? What does it look like for you? You know, for me, it's always starting the day in quiet. It's my thing. It's what I do. I get up before Finley gets up and the day gets loud and crazy and moving fast, and I I move really slow in the beginning. That's what it works. That's what works for me. For some of you, it could, I've heard other people doing this, that their action step, their healthy habit, when they begin to hear that voice of cynicism, that voice of shame, that voice of insecurity, that voice that's probably been haunting them for some time, is what they do is they actually get up and just walk out of the room. It's a way of almost saying, I'm not hearing this today. I'm not listening, and I'm leaving that behind me. So you got to find the thing that works for you, but you got to be active. You got to play offense. What is a habit that you could carry out every day that would renew a healthy mindset? See, this idea of creating a TSA checkpoint in your mind, it's really not, it's not complicated, right? I mean, imagine how much better just your thought life would be if you did these 4 things. Then when thoughts showed up, you're like, I'm going to receive it, review it, refocus, and then renew. I'm waking up, I'm feeling a little bit grumpy today. I don't really know why. What's going on inside of me? Why am I feeling so like on the edge? Okay, I'm going to receive. I'm going to review. I'm going to refocus. I'm going to renew. My friend or roommate or spouse said something that really triggered me a little bit. All right. Before I respond or react, I'm going to receive. I'm going to review. I'm going to refocus. I'm going to renew. Can you imagine how much better your thought life would be if you just did this every single day? See, I in this meeting where this whole idea of a TSA checkpoint came up, this person said to me something to the effect of, man, my life has just been made so much more unnecessarily difficult because I don't interrogate any thought. And this is a person saying, I am actually making my life harder because I allow thoughts to show up. I'm like, come on in, sit on the couch, make yourself at home, drive my life. No TSA checkpoint. He's like, I can only imagine how much better my life would be if I actually practiced what it looks like to interrogate my thoughts and take those thoughts captive before allowing them to shape and inform my life. And so as we wrap up this series, Mind Shift, I thought, okay, I could give you another mind shift, or I can just help give you a plan to navigate those future mind shifts that you're going to need to make. And this is a simple plan to help you begin to shape your mind, to shape your thoughts, and as a result, you will shape your life in turn. If the band wants to come up, I wanted to wrap up with a story from Joshua chapter 1. And this moment in Joshua 1 is this key moment in the story of Israel. It's the moment that they're getting another shot to go into the promised land. And if you're not familiar with the story of Israel and the promised land, the first time they were on the border of the promised land, they allowed their fears about the people who were there to stop them from entering into the promise that God had for them. It wasn't even something they experienced. It was something they thought they might experience, and that was enough to stop them from entering into the promise. It makes you wonder, I wonder how many of us have not stepped into the promises that God has for your life, and it's not because of anything that has actually happened to you. It's because of what you think might happen to you if you actually take this step of faith. That your mindset or thoughts or fears are keeping you on the border of breakthrough in your life. And for the nation of Israel, this entire generation, because they allowed their thoughts that were broken to keep them from the promise that God had for them, as a result, an entire generation wandered the desert. And so now they find themselves, a new generation, on the border of the promised land again. And I want to pause and take a note, because I think the story of Israel is interesting, that it reminds me that while few of us will ever have near-death experiences in our life, that many of us will have near-life experiences in our life. That you're going to have near-life experiences where you almost risked for love, where you almost pursued your dreams, where you almost overcame your fears, where you almost forgave that person and was free, where you almost lived the life that you longed for. See, I think on our deathbed, we're not going to be thinking about our near-death experiences. You're going to be thinking about your near-life experiences that you didn't actually step into. And for Israel, an entire generation didn't step into the promise, but now they have an opportunity to do so, to learn from the past and change the future. And I love what God says to Joshua in Joshua chapter 1. And by the way, it's interesting that Joshua is leading Israel, because in the previous generation, Joshua was one of the only ones that were like, no, we should go into the promised land. Let's not let our fear, our thoughts stop us from what God is doing. And he ended up being one of the only ones from the previous generation to step into the promise that God originally had given to them before it. It's a good reminder That when we choose to take captive these thoughts, we can begin to step into the promises that God has for us. But in Joshua chapter 1, I want to read these verses and then give you 3 truths to hold on to as we wrap up this series. Joshua 1, verse 1 says this: After the death of Moses, the Lord's servant, the Lord spoke to Joshua, son of Nun, Moses' assistant. And he said, Moses, my servant, is dead. Therefore, the time has come for you to lead these people, the Israelites, across the Jordan River into the land I'm giving them. I promise you what I promised Moses. Whatever you set foot, you will be on, and I have given you. From the Negev wilderness in the south to the Lebanon mountains in the north, from the Euphrates River in the east to the Mediterranean Sea in the west, including all the land of the Hittites. No one will be able to stand against you as long as you live. For I will be with you, as I was with Moses. I will not fail you or abandon you. So be strong and courageous, for you are the one who will lead these people to possess all the land that I swore to their ancestors I would give them. Be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey all the instructions Moses gave you. Do not deviate from them, turning either to the right or to the left. Then you will be successful in everything you do. So God gives Joshua, the new leader of Israel, about to step into this promise, this sort of motivational speech. And I think within this speech are 3 truths that I would want you to hold on to consider today as you continue the journey of shifting your mindset. And that first truth comes out of the very first verse. And that truth is this, that the best time for a new beginning is right now. The best time for a new beginning is right now. Joshua 1, verse 1 says, after the death of Moses. This was sort of God's way of saying the old chapter is ended. The era is done. Moses is no longer the leader. The nation of Israel had been mourning the death of Moses, and God, in a sense, here is saying, it's time to move on. It's time to move forward. We can't stay here mourning forever. We need to move forward. He's telling him the best time for a new beginning is right now. It's not tomorrow. It's not someday. It's not when things are easier. No. It's not when all the questions are answered. God says the best time for a new beginning is right now. And it makes me wonder how many of you, if any of you are in this place and there's a chapter that has closed and you're stuck in that closed chapter. Or you're stuck in a loss and you're mourning and there was a time for mourning and now there's a time for moving. Now there's a time to move forward. The relationship ended. The job is gone. The dream and the plan that you thought was going to take place didn't take place. But it's time to move forward because the best time for a new beginning is right now. And I love what God says to Joshua. He says, the time has come. I wonder if God were to sit down with you today, if there would be any area of your life, he's like, the time has come. The time has come to step into what it is that I'm wanting to do in and through your life. The time has come to capture your thoughts and renew your mindset. The time has come to slay the giants in front of you that are keeping you from entering into the promises of God. See, stepping into what God has for your life, you don't even need to go home and pray about this. This is just something that God is inviting all of us to do. The question is, will you do it today? Or will you continue to push it off another day or someday? No. Can I tell you today, you don't need to wait for a new calendar year to become a new you. You don't need to wait till January 1st to start taking your future seriously. You can take it seriously today. You can begin shaping your future here. So the first truth is the best time for a new beginning is right now. And the second truth is this, and this one's a harder one to accept. No one can do this for you. The best time for a new beginning is right now. And the second truth is no one can do this for you. In Joshua 1 verse 6, God tells Joshua, he says this, be strong and courageous, for you are the one. Turn to the person next to you and say, you're the one. You're the one. He didn't say, be strong and courageous because I'm about to do it all for you. He didn't say, be strong and courageous because I'm going to throw you over my almighty shoulder and carry you into the promised land. He says, be strong and courageous, Joshua, for you are the one. And my only guess as to why God tells Joshua, I think 3 times to be strong and courageous, is because Joshua probably wasn't feeling very strong or very courageous. And so if you're here and you're like, I don't feel strong at all. I don't feel courageous at all. That's okay. But you need to understand that you are still the one. No one will change your mindset for you. No one will play offense for your life on your behalf. No one will play to win in your life on your behalf. This is up to you. You are the one. I know it sounds hard to hear, but during the pandemic and during dark moments, something that helped me get through, and maybe this won't resonate with any of you, but it resonated with me, is I had to almost tell myself, Travis, no one's coming to save you. So what are you going to do? How are you going to show up? Because I can live my life just waiting for someone to save me and just walk me through everything, or I can say, no one's coming to save you, man. You got to get up. You got to put one foot in front of the other. And you got to do the natural, and God will do the super. Like, you want God to do supernatural things in your life, you still got to be a part of that process. Do you want miracles or magic? Magic is when you want God to do all the work for you. Miracles is when God brings you to the end of yourself and calls you to obedience, and you obey, and then God does the super that you never thought was possible. But you're still the one. You still got to show up. And the work of shifting your mind is a work you got to show up for every day. That's why there is no end to the series Mind Shift, really. It's just the beginning of a lifelong's work of shifting mindsets. But you got to show up for it. The third is this, and here's the good news, that God is with you on the journey. While you're the one and God calls you to do what you can do, God is still with you on the journey. And here's what God tells Joshua in verse 5. He says, no one will be able to stand against you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will never leave you nor forsake you. Come on, I need to say that line out loud again, because some of you think God's left you. You think God's forgotten about you. You think God's forsaken you or abandoned you or gotten tired of you. He's given up on you. It couldn't be further from the truth. God tells Joshua, and he's telling you today, I will never leave you nor forsake you. You are not alone in the journey that you're on. And it won't be an easy road, but it won't be a road that you're walking all on your own. God is walking with you as you put one foot in front of the other every single day and start stepping into who God has created you to be. I want to just wrap with this one verse, Psalm 55, verse 22. I don't know why, but at the end of this week, I thought the message was done, but then God kept bringing me back to this verse, and maybe this is for just one of you or maybe a lot of you. But Psalm 55 says this, give your burdens to the Lord. And if I could replace burdens with something else, I might say, give your broken mindset to the Lord. Give your shame that you carry in your thoughts to the Lord. Your insecurities that you feel, the wounds that you have, those things that you've allowed to board your life, give them to the Lord, and He will take care of you. He will not permit the godly to slip and fall. Can we close our eyes all over this room right now?